It's finally time. We are at the finish line. It's time to talk about all of my favorite movies and my 1,000 movies that I've seen. The last video was about my 50 worst or 50 least favorite movies of this list. So this video will be the top 100 list. Because I've already mentioned all these movies in reviewing them, I will not talk about all of these movies. It would take way too much time, and I really don't want to spend so much time with these movies anymore. The first 50 will just be in, I don't know, maybe a slideshow or something, and the other 50 I will talk about very briefly, and getting to the top, I will talk about them more and more. Okay, I just have to mention this somewhere in this video. Perfect Blue is not on this list because I forgot to put it in. It would definitely be in my top 50. It's a highly impressive and definitely recommendable anime that has a very confusing story, but is still, after you think about it, makes a lot of sense. And yeah, again, I forgot to put this on the list. See this as an honorable mention. So without wasting any time, let's go. Okay. My number 50 spot is a movie I don't quite understand always, but this movie still made me feel a lot of things, even though I did not understand always what the characters were thinking, and that was Last Black Man in San Francisco. Number 49, another movie that I don't get, but I still really enjoyed, was 2001: A Space Odyssey, directed by Stanley Kubrick. Easily my favorite Francis Ford Coppola movie is Apocalypse Now, on my number 48. As much as I didn't enjoy a lot of Marvel movies, I think Avengers: Infinity War is a perfect finale for this build-up that we had for years, and so this is easily my number 47 spot. Number 46 might not be a very rewatchable movie, but The Hateful Eight, directed by Quentin Tarantino, is still a pretty great time, and I really love this very slow build-up. The same thing also applies to number 45, which is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Also a very slow western, but to be honest, everything is perfect about this movie. Number 44, a very great character-driven crime mystery with LA Confidential. Number 43, one of the most perfect Pixar movies ever, which is Finding Nemo. Even though I don't enjoy everything about this movie anymore, I still think this has some of the best scenes in cinema ever, and that is my number 42 spot, Interstellar, directed by Christopher Nolan. Number 41 is Children of Men, a very impressive movie directed by Alfonso Cuarón. And number 40 is Django Unchained, my favorite, or at least one of my favorite westerns I've ever seen, directed by Quentin Tarantino. Number 39, one of the most energetic movies I've ever seen, The Wolf of Wall Street, directed by Martin Scorsese. And number 38, The Lego Movie, one of the best animated movies ever. I could also mention the Lego Batman movie on this list, but it wouldn't rank as high as the Lego Movie, so I'm just keeping it out of this list. Another animated movie that is basically perfect is WALL-E. That is one of the most unique Pixar movies, definitely, and yeah, I really enjoy it. When it comes to energetic and thrilling action, my number 36 spot, Mission Impossible Fallout, is definitely one of the movies that does it the best. And another Tom Cruise action movie that is my number 35 spot is Top Gun Maverick. What happens if you take incredible action and put it into one of the most ridiculous action movies I've ever seen? You will know when you see Michael Bay's Bad Boys 2, which is my number 34 spot. Number 33, The Departed, a Martin Scorsese movie with one of the most well-written stories I've ever seen. Number 32, a movie that I've only watched once, but that still didn't quite leave me because it's just so impressive, and that is American Beauty. My number 31 spot, another Martin Scorsese movie, The Irishman, and it's amazing. Number 30, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, is not just very heartbreaking, but it can also be so fun and creative, and easily it's one of the most unique romances I've ever seen. Number 29, a movie I cannot wait to never watch again, is Requiem for a Dream, a Darren Aronofsky movie that is just so miserable. Number 28, one of the few movies that I would call a masterpiece, and that is Neon Genesis Evangelion, The End of Evangelion. One of Ghibli's movies that I didn't quite like on a first watch, but I really enjoyed on a rewatch, is Princess Mononoke on my number 27 spot. And an incredibly impressive movie by Park Chan-wook is Oldboy on my number 26 spot. And now heading into our last quarter, this is number 25, The Martian, one of the most fun space adventure movies by Ridley Scott. A very heartwarming comedy about two polar opposite people becoming friends is my number 24 spot, and that is Green Book. Luca is easily Pixar's simplest movie that for some reason really worked for me, and I just thought was incredibly impressive. Now my number 22 spot is kind of tight because I feel about both of these movies in the same way. They both meant to me a lot when I watched them for the first time, but I never really rewatched them, but I remember them meaning so much to me, easily giving them 5 stars. The first one is the Ghibli movie Only Yesterday, directed by Isao Takahata, and the second one is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Both of them just very impressive movies that are incredibly emotional. On number 21, one of my favorite comedies ever, and yeah, definitely one of the funniest films I've ever seen, that is The Naked Gun. And now in our top 20, starting with Dead Poet Society, a great performance by Robin Williams, and one of the best movies to teach the lesson of Carpe Diem. My number 19, one of the most perfectly written mysteries, and one of the best sequels definitely that I have ever seen, is Saw 2. On number 18, The Worst Person in the World is a movie that just came out of nowhere and for some reason just moved me so much and was so heartwarming and emotional and also fun but very sad as well. This movie had a lot of different sides to it that I just did not expect, because I actually didn't expect anything from this movie, and it really surprised me. Even though it's been some time since I really wanted to watch this movie again, I still remember this movie being so incredibly impressive, not just on a technical scale, but also the acting and the writing, and basically everything about this movie is just so incredible. Number 17, The Lighthouse, a movie that I might have seen too much, but yeah, this movie never really got worse for me in my head. It's just a very perfect film that I don't see replicated ever again, because I don't think anybody is capable of making a movie like this other than Robert Eggers. And another Damien Chazelle movie is La La Land. Yeah, just a very beautiful romance and a great movie that has this very fantastical portrayal of its romance, with it being constructed as a musical, but it still manages to make these two characters very human and yeah, very realistic in a way, because it's a very realistic story in the end still, which I really enjoyed about this movie. Number 15, one of the most impressively made movies ever, is a German movie called Victoria. When you hear about one-shot movies that have a lot of cuts in them because they stitch together all the different scenes that they filmed, I think it's still impressive, but a movie that is even more impressive in my opinion is Victoria, because they moved all the way through the city that they filmed this movie in and acted this out for over 2 hours, which is very impressive. It's kind of like a stage play in a whole city, and I just can't help but appreciate this a lot. Another very heartwarming movie about two polar opposite people becoming friends, just like Green Book, is Intouchables, the French movie that is even more heartwarming to me. Yeah, I just love this movie so much. Basically everything feels very comfortable. Both of the main characters are incredibly charming. I love the main theme of this movie. I don't know if it's an original piece of music for this film or if it's something that already existed, but to be honest, every time I hear it, I just think about this movie and I get very emotional in my head, because I just really grew to love these characters a lot. A movie I never expected to have so high on my list is my number 13 spot, which is Blade Runner 2049. I was so blown away by this movie. Even more blown away because I didn't even like the first Blade Runner as much. I mean, I liked it, but I appreciated it more than I enjoyed it. For some reason, this sequel just made everything so much better. This atmosphere of this film is so perfect because the cinematography and the performances and the music come together so incredibly well. It is such a sad world that this movie takes place in a way, and I really love this very slow progression of this plot. With a main character that I think is so fascinating to watch. Ryan Gosling is a very good actor in this film. And now another movie that I think is very well written is Knives Out. I feel like a murder mystery is only really fun at a second watch, because you can look at all the clues that you didn't see when you first watched it, when you didn't know who the killer is. But after third watch, I feel like they don't entertain you as much anymore, because it's just, because at this point there's not much to pick up on. But Knives Out still has a lot of things that I didn't pick up on the first watch. I think I've watched it 3 or 4 times, and it's still so much fun. I just didn't expect this movie to be so much fun, even after so many rewatches. But this really shows how well written and well constructed this movie is. It's so much fun. And now, not quite in my top 10 is a movie that really was impressive. It had a lot of different styles to me that I luckily all like. The first half of this movie is very different from the second half. I mean, it's very apparent, but I think that makes for a very great movie. It's Waves, directed by Trey Edward Schultz. He managed to make a very stressful movie in the first half that somehow evolves into a very emotional and heartwarming movie in the second half. Some of the best acting and cinematography I've seen. It has such a great use of music in this film. Like, there's so much music in this film, but it's always fitting. There's always a reason for the music to be there. It's not just as a gimmick. Yeah, what can I say? This is just such a well-constructed story from front to back. and a movie that just kind of never left me. And now finally my top 10 movies of this whole list. This has been very difficult actually. First of all, my number 10 spot, that is a movie directed by Thomas Winterberg. Another Round, for some reason, is one of the most fun movies ever, even though it's about alcoholism. It's about four main characters who are very sad and boring in life, and they just start drinking a lot in their daily lives, and after that their lives get like very happy again. And that's actually such a sad concept. This movie has a great way of mixing very sad and very fun sequences and making them fit very well together. Like, this is not messy at all. This is so perfectly acted and written that really this movie feels so comfortable to watch to me, even though it is very tragic in some cases. I love the acting in this film. I really want to see the other movies that this director has done, because I have not seen any other movie except for this one, which is very sad. But Another Round is very impressive and definitely a very deserved number 10. Number 9, when I said about Waves that the first half is very stressful and that it has a lot of influence from other movies, I mean this movie in particular, because Uncut Gems is the movie about stress. It's one of the most stressful experiences I've ever had with the film. Uncut Gems is directed by the Safdie brothers, and they just kind of have a way of doing that and executing it very well. This is a movie about a gambling addict, and he is a person who manages to make some of the most stupid mistakes constantly over the course of the movie. Like, he never does something good, actually. Every time something good happens to him, he makes it worse again because he has to gamble again. That's basically the whole movie, but it works so well. It's so good. And this movie again has an incredible use of very loud sound design, very loud music, and such great cinematography. It's easily, again, it's one of the most stressful movies ever, but one of the most satisfying endings to a film I've ever seen. I don't know, this movie I've also seen like 3 times, and each time that I've seen it, it just grew on me more and more. And yeah, I think this movie is perfect. My number 8 spot, a movie that I think is very similar to Waves actually, at least in its topic and the way it progresses its plot. And this movie is The Place Beyond the Pines, directed by Derek Cianfrance. I'm not quite sure what to say differently about this movie than with Waves, but yeah, this movie kind of sticks out to me even more because it just feels more emotional to me, more compelling. I love the main character of Ryan Gosling, and I love the way his actions influence a lot of other people in this movie. This is one of those movies that I don't quite know why they appeal to me so much, but yeah, it just does. And it's just the right thing. Something just clicked. And yeah, I'm just gonna move on to my number 7 spot. I already had La La Land and also First Man on this list, so obviously the one movie that I have seen by Damien Chazelle that I have not mentioned yet is Whiplash. This has to be on this list. One of the most perfect movies I've ever seen. Not just perfectly written, but also perfectly edited, perfectly acted. Everything about this movie is perfect. There's nothing bad about this movie. If you see the first draft in a way of this movie, which is the short film that is made as a proof of concept, it just shows how perfectly thought out this movie is, because basically there's nothing different about it. Everything that is in the short film is exactly like this in this movie, just with a much more production quality. And it just shows how well Damien Chazelle thought out this movie. I mean, I don't know what to say. It's incredibly stressful as well, but in a good way. And it's a perfect portrayal of how one person just completely crashes in life because of this one obsession that he has. It's an obsessive artist story executed to perfection. My number 6 spot, another very comfortable movie to me. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, directed by Quentin Tarantino, is definitely my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie. It still is very difficult for me to talk about this movie because everything just blends in so perfectly. This is, again, it's very comfortable. I just love hanging out with these characters. It's a hangout movie, definitely. You just see, I think, 1 or 2 days in the lives of these people and how they act in their environment. Through that, you get to get a glimpse of what Hollywood looked like during those times, of how the people acted during those times, what the music was like, what the movies were like. Everything about this movie is a portrayal of not just the characters, but also of this time period, and I think it's just so well done. You really feel the love of movies that Quentin Tarantino has with this film, especially with this film, not just in his other movies, and that's why this movie just kind of stuck with me a lot. And now my top 5 movies. This wasn't very difficult because I've mostly had all these movies for a very long time in my top 4 on Letterboxd, but considering every single movie that I've seen up until this point, it still made me kind of rethink it a lot, but it mostly just stayed the same. My number 5 spot is Your Name, an anime directed by Makoto Shinkai. I think it's one of 2 animes on this list. Was perfect. it's two people falling in love under such weird circumstances, and because they have been through so many things in this very short runtime of a movie, it just feels so earned at the end when, you know, obviously they fall in love. It's a very unconventional romance, but one that just works so incredibly well. Incredible animation and cinematography, incredible characters, a lot of humor in this movie that just works so well, and yeah, this is such an emotional journey for me. Now moving on to my number 4 spot. This is actually so weird for me because for a long time I only really loved part 3 of this series, but then I rewatched this one and I just realized it's not really better, but it's definitely just much more well constructed and much more to the point. That's Raiders of the Lost Ark. I just love Indiana Jones so much. I think these movies are incredible fun. Even part 4, which was very, very bad, still managed to be so much fun. I just love this aesthetic of this movie. I love Indiana Jones as a character. I love every single adventure that he goes on. In a way, I don't know, these movies are just the right thing for me, even though they are not something like incredible, unique or outstanding. I mean, in a way they are, but they're also not. But to be honest, it's kind of difficult to really say something exact that this movie does right, that appeals so much to me, but they just do. And even though Steven Spielberg has a talent for just making any movie in any genre and making it almost perfect, this one definitely takes a cake for one of Steven Spielberg's best movies. It's a very charming movie. There's a lot of great tension in this film, but the movie still gets that it has to be fun, and that it is. It's so entertaining, thrilling, and just fun to watch. So that's my number 4 spot. My number 3 spot is definitely the highest movie that I think I have not given 5 stars, but it still is just amazing and it meant a lot to me, which is Sound of Metal. Sound of Metal, directed by Darius Marder, is just something else. A lot of movies that I don't quite get or that I don't quite enjoy on a first watch, but then rewatch to kind of get a better understanding of what this movie exactly does, end up meaning a lot to me and sticking with me for a longer time than movies that I instantly just enjoyed. And this is definitely one of those. I just couldn't really connect to the characters, and I still sometimes don't quite know what is going on in the minds of these characters, especially with the main character played by Riz Ahmed, who is one of the best performances definitely that I've ever seen. I think he's so incredible, but they just portray some very difficult emotions. Like, they don't 100% portray their emotions so that you can understand them. No, they just feel very conflicted in a way, and I think that's just so impressive. Like, not knowing what's going on in these characters is kind of something interesting that I just appreciate about this film. Like, I will probably never quite figure out, but I still just enjoy watching it so much. So moving on to number 2. This movie is basically a representative of every movie that I think from this franchise could be on this list. I could put Star Wars, the original one from the 70s. I could put The Empire Strikes Back on this list. I could also put Star Wars The Force Awakens maybe on this list, or even Rogue One. Or at least all of these movies could have a spot on this list. Maybe not my number 2 spot, but definitely a spot. But one movie that I just felt deserved it the most because it is just more my generation. I'm more nostalgic for it, and it just meant a lot to me, is Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. I love how they improved basically everything about this film in comparison to the first 2 movies. I mean, part 1 and 2 are just not very perfect. They are still great in a way. They have great world building, but something is not good about them always. Something can always be improved, and with this one, they just came in and improved everything, literally everything. The acting is better, the effects are better, the story is better, it's much more thrilling, much more exciting, it's just so epic. I love this movie. I love how this is such a great transition from the first trilogy to the next trilogy. This could probably switch between, again, Star Wars Part 4 and Part 5, because I just love all of these movies as much. So this could probably change tomorrow, but I just had to take one of those, and yeah, this to me just was the right one to pick. That's my number 2 spot, and my number 1 spot. I haven't seen anyone on the internet that has this movie on its number 1 spot, and I'm not doing this to feel unique or anything, but this just kind of did it for me. 8 Mile is my number 1 spot. I watched this movie as a movie about Eminem, but this movie evolved to something else for me. Like, this is such a great portrayal of one character who is really at the bottom, but he would do anything to get out of a situation. The main character, played by Eminem, is such a great main character. I love following his journey through this 1 week that we see of his life. It just really gets you into this character, seeing what the world around him is like, seeing his workplace, seeing where he goes every day, seeing the conversations he has with his friends, with his family, everything about his life. It feels so realistic and very honest in a way, even though it's very tragic in some ways and very sad and can look just very depressing. It still manages to make me feel very comfortable. What I think is most impressive about this movie is definitely the ending. Very beautiful, but very realistic ending as well to a story like this, which I just thought was impressive. And I am going to leave it at that. This is my top 100 list. It's my personal list. It's definitely not an objective list. Thank you for watching and goodbye. Cheers.